Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavit Vishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May Brahman protect us, both the preceptor and the disciple. May he grant us knowledge equally. May both of us have the vigor to acquire knowledge together. And may this knowledge be complete knowledge. May love and harmony be with us all. May we not envy each other through misunderstanding. Om, peace, peace, peace. Well, good morning, friends. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for today, Raka Banerjee. And you'll be speaking on the topic, the paradox of freedom. For those who may not know, she has been practicing Zen Buddhism for the past 9 years. And she was ordained a Zen priest 4 years ago after studying Buddhist chaplaincy. And she most recently completed her studies in social work. So you'll be she's probably done quite a bit of research on these topics because they are quite relevant within Zen Buddhism. And she uses, we have known her, I've known her since she was born. So she's kind of grown up here in the Vedanta Society. And I remember her as a little girl sitting on her father's lap singing Ram Nam with the book open, 4 or 5 years old. And she would sing, and now she leads our Ram Nam every second Sunday, twice a month, pardon me. And so all those songs are burned into her memory since childhood. So we are quite happy to have her now many years in the future to see how she's grown. And I don't know if she's actually received her certification yet for her social work, because she said that would take some time, but she does want to use her training as a Buddhist priest. And also she incorporates what she's learned in Vedanta in all her practices. So she's a Zen Buddhist Vedantist. So Swami Satchidananda is out of town. He's been invited to Chicago he'll come back tomorrow. So we are having guest speakers in the meantime. So if Raka is available, we will start her talk on the paradox of freedom. Thank you.
No. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you all here today. Thank you so much to Swami Avikarananda, or Uncle Ben, for that introduction, and to Swami Satchidananda, who's traveling right now, for having me back for another talk. My topic today is the paradox of freedom. But to get us started, I'm going to begin with a little confession, which is I don't do well with unstructured time. It's a strange problem to have, I know, but there's something that feels oppressive about it to me. It's very similar to the experience that I had when I sat down to write this talk, just staring at the infinite space of this page stretching before me, blank and empty and accusing. It raises such a host of profound existential questions, the blank page. Much like a day full of unstructured time, a blank page of a day. How should it be filled? What is the right thing to do, morally speaking, on a fundamental level to fill that time? And perhaps most of all, how am I the one in charge of making this decision? Maybe if I knew the entire parameters of the universe, if I had clarity on the rules that define how each of us are supposed to spend the hours and minutes of our lives, then maybe I would be equipped to make the right decision. But there was no handbook waiting for me in the delivery room, as far as I know, when I showed up here. And although lots of people have lots of opinions on how a human life should be spent, the final call is up to me. Even if I choose to follow someone else's take on it, the ultimate responsibility still lies with me. I'm still the arbiter of that decision. Now, we might just call this anxiety. And to be sure, it is. Let's be really clear about that. But it's also true, right? I imagine most people don't tie themselves up into knots about this kind of thing. Indeed, I'm sure a lot of people would be happy just to have a day off from multiple part-time, low-wage jobs just to get by, and wouldn't choose to spend that single day struggling, deeply ensconced in some state of existential paralysis. It's a problem that requires the luxury of free time. But it's a familiar problem to me, the problem of time, of what we are supposed to do with our limited time in life. My father passed away when I was quite young, 9 years old. And so I've always been aware that our time in life is limited. I don't think it feels that way to a lot of people, especially when you're younger. But I've always been incredibly aware of the proximity of death. Those of you who have been touched by death will know how it has the potential to render everything surreal. Like, how is it that the world can just keep turning, the buses keep running, the sun keeps shining, like people are still commuting to work, but this person is gone. This precious, most precious, beloved person with all of their vitality, their laughter, their specific way of turning their head a little to the side when they listen intently, their reading glasses, the way they keep one hand in their pocket when they walk, like all the tiny, meaningless and utterly meaningful habits and traits and quirks that make up a human being, all gone, gone forever. And in that vast gap that's left behind, that place where they should be, questions of meaning appear and cannot be answered. What was their life? What did it mean? What does my life mean? Does anything matter if everything dies? Or is it that everything matters because everything dies? This proximity of death, which signals the end of time itself, as far as we're concerned, it puts a hard stop on the amount of time that we're allotted in this life. And this goes for all of us, regardless of whether we believe in reincarnation or not. Whether or not there are more lives ahead, this particular assemblage of molecules into the shape and form that you call yourself will come to an end and will not come back again. This shape, this name, this history, this set of connections to people and places and things, this will come to an end and will not return. All the moments of your life lived until now, they are irrevocably lost to the ravages of time. They will not return. Even our memories are just constructions of the present, right? Their accuracy in terms of representing the past is debatable. They shift each time we look at them. If you look closely, you can see the loss occurring in every moment. This moment right now is already past. As I speak these next words in my sentence, every moment is this endless meeting of past and future, of death and life meeting each other in the instantaneous and ungraspable now. 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 And so, given the limited nature of our time here, the hard stop that we all face, which will arrive at a moment in time that cannot be known by us in advance, the true immensity and unbearable nature of our freedom is brought down upon us. We have limited time. And as Buddhists say, to be born into the human realm is a precious gift because it is the only realm from which enlightenment is possible. Talk about pressure. So we have limited time and we have the precious gift of a human life. What do we do? This is what paralyzes me when I'm forced to face the horror of an unstructured day stretching out before me. I'm going to die. What do I do? I'm going to die. What do I do? This might sound a little unhinged, and once again, it is, but it's not the most normal thing to decide to shave your head and publicly commit yourself to attempting to manifest the truth of non-separation in all your actions. So I think being a little bit unhinged can be helpful because, to be honest, a lot of what passes for normal in our society doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I'm going to die. What do I do? In Dostoevsky's novel, The Brothers Karamazov, there's a story called The Grand Inquisitor. Maybe some of you have heard of it. The premise is that Jesus Christ has returned during the worst days of the Spanish Inquisition and is thrown in prison by the Grand Inquisitor, who basically yells at Christ for offering mankind true freedom, saying to him, "I tell you, man has no preoccupation more nagging than to find the person to whom that unhappy creature may surrender the gift of freedom with which he is born." The Grand Inquisitor accuses Christ, saying, "You desire that man's love should be free, that he should follow you freely, enticed and captivated by you." And so the Grand Inquisitor says that by giving people freedom of will, freedom of choice, Christ left us in restlessness and confusion and torment, left to make do, quote, during terrible moments of life, moments of the most terrible, fundamental, and tormenting spiritual questions, with only a free decision of the heart. Of course, the Grand Inquisitor is conveniently using this accusation to justify the horrors of the Inquisition. But there is something to what he says, which is part of why this story is so famous. There really is something intolerable about having the freedom to choose what we do with our limited time, about bearing the ultimate responsibility for our lives. I think it's because when we are faced with our ostensible freedom as humans, to choose how we spend our time, to choose what we make of our lives, to make decisions, to act, it brings us face to face instead with our experience of bondage. This is part of what I'm calling the paradox of freedom, that although we are ostensibly free in all these ways, so much of our experience of the world is not one of freedom, but of being bound. Even when we have the various worldly sources of freedom, time, money, resources, our fundamental experience is not one of abundance, but of lack. In fact, achieving these things that we think will bring us freedom in the world, time, money, resources, what often stands out once we've gotten these things is that our deeper sense of lack becomes even more apparent. It's like once we can't attribute that sense of lack to these other things, time, lack of money, lack of resources, it then becomes impossible to avoid that there is something more fundamental about our experience of lack in this life, something more inherent or intrinsic about it. Does that make sense? There's a French psychoanalyst, Jacques Lacan, who basically said that lack is central to the experience of subjectivity itself, that lack is central to the sense that we all have of being a subject in relationship to an external world, external objects. In fact, he goes further than that. He says that lack is actually what creates subjectivity in the first place. I'm going to read a quote from his second seminar, and bear with me here because although it might sound a little dense, if you listen carefully, there is a lot of non-dual thought in this. The resonance with Advaita and Zen is quite striking to me, even though he's speaking from a totally different discipline and worldview. Okay, so here's the quote. And don't worry, I'm going to unpack it sentence by sentence. Desire, a function central to all human experience, is the desire for nothing nameable. And at the same time, this desire lies at the origin of every variety of animation. If being were only what it is, there wouldn't even be room to talk about it. Being comes into existence as an exact function of this lack. Being attains a sense of self in relation to being as a function of this lack in the experience of desire. Okay, so he's saying a lot of things here. First, he says desire, which is central to all human experience. He says that this desire is actually for nothing nameable. This aligns very strongly with Vedantic and Buddhist ideas of Trishna in Sanskrit, or Tanha in Pali, which means thirst. Thirst, or craving, or desire, or attachment is the second noble truth in Buddhism, which points to the overarching nature of desire, which goes beyond desire for any specific thing. Or as Lacan talks about it, our desired objects are just the structural placeholders for the void that animates desire. So putting it in terms that might resonate more for some of us, you want a cookie. You eat too many cookies. Now you want some Tums and a nap. So the object of desire keeps changing, right? The objects are just the latest form that desire takes on. Each of those things are nameable. Cookie, Tums, nap. But the experience of desire remains because it transcends any given nameable thing, right? It is the desire for nothing nameable, but we keep giving objects to it because we think that an object will satisfy it, but it doesn't work that way. So, desire, a function central to all human experience, is the desire for nothing nameable. Then he says, and at the same time, this desire lies at the origin of every variety of animation. If being were only what it is, there wouldn't even be room to talk about it. Being comes into existence as an exact function of this lack. This is incredibly profound. If being were only what it is, there wouldn't even be room to talk about it. Do you get what he's saying here? If being were only what it is basically an expression of non-duality, where there is no separate subject and a separate object. That's why there wouldn't even be room to talk about it. Talking in and of itself requires language, which involves symbolizing, which involves separation between subject and object. So then Lacan says, being comes into existence as an exact function of this lack. This has incredible parallels to the first noble truth, which is suffering, or dukkha. The Buddha taught that the experience of being a being in this world is inherently marked by dukkha, or suffering. This teaching is often misunderstood as if it's saying that life is an endless veil of tears marked only by sorrow and suffering, which is obviously not the case. As mentioned before, there are cookies, which I greatly enjoy, especially the oatmeal chocolate chip cookie at Hello Robin on 19th. Highly recommend. Highly recommend. Talk about Trishna, am I right? Anyway. Dukkha can mean a lot of things aside from suffering. It's been translated as unpleasantness, unsatisfactoriness, unease, pain. Although my favorite translation comes from meditation teacher Lee Brasington, who translates it as a bummer. It's pretty accurate. But I might add another translation to it, with thanks to Lacan, lack. Being comes into existence as an exact function of this lack. Being attains a sense of self in relation to being as a function of this lack in the experience of desire. In the first and second noble truths, this very same idea is expressed, that our experience of being is shot through with dukkha, with the sense of lack, which for the Buddha co-arises with our experience of trishna, thirst, or desire. Our experience of being, of having a body and a mind, is inherently dualistic, subject, object. I'm here, you all are over there. In the non-dual experience, there's no lack because there's no separation. Advaita, as in Advaita Vedanta, means not two. When there's two, there's lack. So our experience of being a little self, separate from all these other little selves, is one of lack, of dukkha. Putting it another way, our experience of having a body and a mind is coterminous with having all sorts of problems. We've got to keep the body fed, make sure it's getting enough sleep. Meanwhile, the mind is busy ruminating on the past or anxieting about the future. We feel lack. We feel a sense that something is missing. We make mistakes. We have regrets. We want things we can't have. And on top of everything, we're going to die. What do? See, we've come full circle. We're right back where we started. We're going to die. What do? Well, I have some proposals of what to do. So for the rest of this talk, I want to investigate lack a bit further. I want to break down our experience of how we feel bound by this body-mind. Specifically, I want to look at three aspects of it, three ways that we feel bound. The first, I'm calling scarcity, that we can't get what we want. The second, I'm calling deficiency, the feeling that we ourselves are not what we want, that we are somehow deficient, broken, unlovable, inadequate, unworthy. And then the third, I'm calling isolation, the feeling that we're separate, that we're alone, that we're locked away in these little cages of our bodies and minds and can't get out. Scarcity, deficiency, isolation. Let's take them one at a time and see what we can do about them. So first of all, we're bound by scarcity, the fact that we can't get what we want. In a lot of spiritual homilies, I feel like there's a lot of finger wagging that goes on, like, don't just think about buying a new car, turn your mind towards God. Right? In all honesty, I did recently just get a new car, but we don't need to get into that. The things that we want are meaningful too. It's not all just cookies and new cars, right? We want love, we want companionship, we want to be understood, we want to do meaningful work, we want to be creative and express our talents and share our gifts with others. We want a world where people don't honk and scream at each other in traffic. We want peace. There are a lot of things that we don't want that are also meaningful. We don't want people dying on the street, cold and alone. We don't want to be separated from the people that we love. We don't want to see our abilities and our capacities stripped from us by the slow decline of our bodies and minds as we age. I'm saying all this to say that the things that we want and don't want, they matter, right? They're poignant, they're powerful, they're the stuff of our lives. And this is what I always think of as the Buddha's bait and switch, because we've already talked about the first and second noble truths, that our experience as embodied beings is one of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness and lack, and that this is driven by or coterminous with trishna, or thirst, desire. The Buddha says desire drives lack. Lacan says lack drives desire, but whatever, right? It's a little chicken or the egg. Like, whichever came first, they're both there. But then the third noble truth is that there's a way out of this whole mess. And then the fourth noble truth describes what that way is, the Eightfold Path, which we don't have time to get into right now. But just there is a way. But here's the bait and switch. He promises freedom from suffering, right? The hamster wheel of lack and desire. But he never promised freedom from sickness, old age, and death. It's like, what? Like, what are you even offering then? Like, have we not lost the plot a little bit here? Like, what good is the Eightfold Path if we're still not free from sickness, old age, and death? Here's the trick. You still have sickness, old age, and death, and war, and loneliness, and people screaming at each other in traffic, and separation from those we love, all of that. You just stop wanting it to be any other way. Now you really get to the heart of the bait and switch. It's like, what even is this? Just gaslight ourselves into being okay with everything? But here's the thing, there's really no way out. As one of my favorite Zen teachers, Joko Beck, likes to say, there's no cookie for the small self. Things don't end well for this body-mind, right? We're going to die, and there's nothing we can do about it. But a lot of us little selves come to spiritual practice because we're secretly hoping for a cookie. Man, I'm really talking about cookies a lot today. In this case, though, a metaphorical cookie, right? We feel the sense of scarcity, that things aren't going the way we want, and then there's a hope that if we practice, if we go to the temple, somehow things will get better, that things will go the way we want, at least a little bit more. But here's the thing, again, things will get better, but they won't go the way we want. All the paths keep saying the same things in different ways. In Zen, we talk about being with life as it is. In the Bhagavad Gita, work without attachment to the fruits. In the Isha Upanishad, rejoice in him through renunciation. All of it requires letting go of our desire for things to be the way that we want them to be. Feels a little brutal, I'm not gonna lie. But here's where my idea of the paradox of freedom really bears fruit, if you will. Although we're ostensibly free to live as we like, we feel bound. But when we bind ourselves, we feel free. Given freedom, we feel bound. When we bind ourselves, we feel free. In the Zen tradition, we often take time to sit sesshin, which is a period of silent retreat. Sesshin means gathering the heart-mind. We meditate for 8 to 10 hours a day. We take meals in silence, perform our tasks in silence, and just attend to our experience as it is. As far as binding yourself, in some ways it can feel pretty extreme. You have no control over your schedule. You sit when the schedule tells you to sit. You walk when it tells you to walk. You eat when it tells you to eat. You often don't sleep that much. You don't talk, you don't read, you don't journal. Your phone is off. Your food is restricted to what you eat in a ritualized manner in the meditation hall, the zendo. It's a lot of binding oneself. It's a lot of intentionally rejecting certain types of freedom that we're used to indulging without even thinking about it in our daily lives. And yet, paradoxically enough, it is, for me at least, the most freeing experience imaginable. I remember my Zen teacher, Genzan, sharing in a Dharma talk years ago about how during a sesshin, he realized with no small amazement that the only items he needed to sustain his daily life were a robe to wear, a cushion to sit on, and a set of 3 bowls and some utensils to eat with. We really don't need much. When we constrain ourselves in these ways and we limit ourselves to just a few things, we start to see how our dependence on our sense comforts actually restricts our sense of freedom. I think it was Shinzen Young, a meditation teacher, who said that what we want as humans is a comfortable body and a mind with answers. Comfortable body, mind with answers. When we sit zazen, when we do sitting Zen meditation, it forces us to sit with an uncomfortable body and see the inherent limitations of any answers that our mind can come up with. We practice not getting what we want and sitting there anyway. And in doing that practice over and over and over and over, something shifts. As I said before in one of my earlier talks on the principles and practices of Zen Buddhism, in Zazen, there is a felt experience of the absence of lack, of the lack of lack. Nothing is missing. So that's my proposal for this experience of being bound by scarcity. Sit Zazen, do your mantra japa. in the power of the meditative space, lack vanishes. So that's scarcity. Up next, deficiency. We're bound by the sense that we are unlovable, inadequate, unworthy. We usually think of lack in terms of scarcity, as I've been talking about, lacking the things that we want. But I think a more frightening aspect of lack is the deeply felt sense that we ourselves are lacking, that we are not enough as we are. In cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, there's an idea that we often have negative core beliefs, and that those don't vary all that much from person to person. A feeling deep down of being unworthy or worthless or of being unlovable. A sense that even the people who love us, if they really knew who we were, all the things we've done, all the unwholesome thoughts we've had, they wouldn't love us anymore. Or just a feeling that we're not good enough. Good enough for what? Who set the standard that we're failing to meet? We don't always know. It's often a combination of societal expectations, our parents' expectations, the social and moral standards of the culture and communities that we find ourselves in. As humans, the greatest danger that we ever faced when we lived in tribes, when our species had evolved, was ostracism from the group. It's literally a matter of life and death, right? You can't survive on your own. So based on the norms of the groups that we find ourselves in, our mind takes over and acts in certain ways to ensure that we don't get ourselves kicked out of the group, by creating a harsh internal voice that makes sure that we don't step out of line. This is basically Freud's idea of the superego. Familiar with heard of the superego? Yeah. So it's the part of our mind that is in charge of holding on to all of the rules and regulations and norms and standards and moral codes of the communities that we're part of. Parents, teachers, religious authorities, societal expectations, all of that. And the superego is in charge of basically wielding it against us to restrain our baser impulses. It's good on some level, right? It's good that we're able to live in huge cities and not be constantly afraid of being murdered when we step outside our door, although I guess sometimes it depends where you live. But really, the astonishing thing about human communities is actually how much cooperation there is between strangers. Yes, things do go off the rails sometimes, but when that happens, it's news. It is more the exception than the rule. So in that way, it's good that we live constrained by certain rules and norms and standards. But the superego can run amok within us too, in ways that really get in our way. And not just in our daily lives, but in our spiritual practice as well. We can be overly harsh and self-punitive in a way that borders on self-obsessed, and then it's not helpful, right? It's not helping us to be better humans or kinder to one another. To be genuinely kind to each other, we have to know how to be kind to ourselves as well. If you think that you only hold yourself to exacting and unrelenting standards, don't fool yourself. You're holding others to those as well. It's not really possible to apply them internally without having them also be the lens through which you see the world. The psychoanalyst Erich Fromm differentiates between what he calls the authoritarian conscience and the humanistic conscience. The authoritarian conscience is basically same as what Freud called the superego. And here I'm quoting from Fromm's book, Man for Himself. It's the voice of an internalized external authority, the parents, the state, or whoever the authorities in a culture happen to be. Fromm says that once the authority figure is internalized, the person takes over the role of the authority by treating himself with the same strictness and cruelty. What matters is the fact that the authoritarian conscience is fed by destructiveness against the person's own self, so that destructive strivings are thus permitted to operate under the disguise of virtue. Destructive strivings are permitted to operate under the disguise of virtue. This is so fascinating to me. It relates to an idea of mine that I call dollhouse morality. I had an image during meditation sometime in the last year or two of seeing myself as like a little kid playing with dolls and getting really upset with myself for doing it wrong. Like, no, I put the pink doll in the purple house. It doesn't go in the purple house. Like, I messed it all up. And then this image of God, like a parent figure, watching me with some kind amusement, both concerned for me because I was so upset about it, but also aware that it really doesn't matter which doll goes in which house. This feels to me like the way that we often wield the superego against ourselves. All the expectations and standards that we're falling short of. It's dollhouse morality. We're just tying ourselves into further knots over things that really don't matter. Obviously, some things really do matter. I'm not trying to advocate for getting rid of our sense of doing what's right. I'm just saying that it's worth looking at the ways that we talk to ourselves and seeing if it really makes sense, or if we're just allowing ourselves to behave destructively towards ourselves under the guise of virtue. How do we do this? How do we look at this? Meditation is one way, for sure. When we sit with ourselves and just allow our minds to be as they are, we can often see them at work more clearly than when we're just fully in our thoughts, like riding the waves. Meditation allows us to sit back a bit, sit on the bank of the river of thought, and see what our minds are getting up to. But sometimes those mental patterns are really entrenched, right? We've had them for a really long time, and it's hard to see them on our own. It's like the little parable that David Foster Wallace told at his famous commencement speech back in 2005. Heard it? Yeah. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What's water?" Our mental patterns are like the water that we swim in. We don't even see them, but they shape everything about our experience of life. This is the purpose of psychoanalysis. By working with another person, we can see more than we can see just on our own. With an astute and sensitive listener who can hold a mirror up to us, we can suddenly come to insights about the way that our mind works and see what's driving our behaviors in ways that we couldn't before. My own psychoanalyst recently described the purpose of it as internalizing the reflective function. When undergoing analysis, we become more attuned to our habits of mind, and that very awareness gives us more freedom to choose a different path, to not respond instinctively, reflexively from a place of reactivity. I sometimes have an image of trying to do psychological work on your own as trying to look around a dark room with just a flashlight. And there are little creatures scurrying around the edges, but they're moving too quickly for you to see with the single beam of light from the flashlight. Right? You can't quite catch them. But in contrast, if you work with a therapist or an analyst, it's like they hold a mirror up to you. So when you point the flashlight at the mirror, the light is refracted in all sorts of unexpected ways, and it catches the little scurrying creatures by surprise. These little creatures are like our psychological and behavioral patterns, the things that get in our way, that serve as hindrances on the spiritual path. Our past samskaras, in Hindu parlance, past impressions that we haven't yet worked through or resolved. Or for Erich Fromm, they're components of the authoritarian conscience, norms and standards that we've gotten from others, which we've weaponized against ourselves. But through psychoanalysis, through therapy, we can move from the authoritarian conscience to the humanistic conscience. Fromm says, quote, "The humanistic conscience represents not only the expression of our true selves, it contains also the essence of our moral experiences in life. In it, we preserve the knowledge of our aim in life and of the principles through which to attain it. Those principles which we have discovered ourselves, as well as those we have learned from others and which we have found to be true." End quote. To me, this idea of the humanistic conscience sounds a whole lot like the Hindu conception of dharma. To find out and follow the precepts by which we can play the role in life that we were meant to play. So to free ourselves from the bonds of deficiency, the sense that we ourselves are lacking, unworthy, unlovable, inadequate, we have to find some way to find psychic freedom, freedom from our defense mechanisms taking up so much of our life's energy. We can do it on our own. We can sit in meditation and observe these defense mechanisms at work. But more often than not, it's easier to do it with a qualified professional, a therapist, a psychoanalyst. I'm a little biased here. As Uncle Ben said, I just graduated from master's in social work. But, someone who can hold a mirror up to us and reflect the light back to us in new and unexpected ways. There's a paradox here, too. The more that we think that we're totally free of psychological problems, the more likely it is that we're actually bound invisibly to ourselves by patterns and behaviors that are preoccupying us beyond our awareness and probably causing no end of trouble for ourselves and others. And paradoxically, the more that we become aware of the numerous psychological bonds that we're struggling against, the more that we feel truly free to make a different choice, to respond differently, to have the freedom of an option rather than the bondage of the instinctive behavior. So we've covered scarcity, we've covered deficiency, last but not least, isolation. Lacan traces the origin of our fundamental sense of lack to language itself, which creates a division between subject and experience. Lacan views language as alienating us from ourselves. It's like an intrusion from the outside. Without words, without things having nama, rupa, right, in Sanskrit, name and form, there's just non-dual experience. But once we introduce language, there's subject and object, there's you over there, me over here. As I said before, language requires symbolizing, which requires separation. And it's commonly understood that language actually shapes our experience, like the idea that Inuit people have more words for snow and so see it in more nuanced ways than we do, although apparently linguistic scholars are still battling it out about whether that's true or not. But on a most fundamental level, we can see how language shapes our experience. And our language constantly reifies our sense of dualism, of separation. My body, my robe, your body, I am hungry, I am tired. Our words reify this experience of subject and object constantly. And what all of that tells me is ultimately I'm alone in here. None of you can get in here, into my mind, and share this experience of body-mind with me. Our language, our stories, our narratives, they all add another layer on top of reality. Joko Beck, the Zen teacher I mentioned earlier, offers this description of us living in a house, which is our life, and then just adding another house on top of it, which is like the superstructure covering our experience of reality. Over a lifetime, we lay down layer upon layer of narratives and stories. They keep building on each other, and we construct an impenetrable wall between ourselves and reality. All we see is the wall. We can't see anything beyond it. Letting go of this narrative layer upon layer means that we can be with our lives as they are, without separation, without language, without symbolizing anything. In the silence of meditation, conceptual thought can drop away. Can we ever really not symbolize anything? I don't know. Can I ever look at that and not immediately know that it's a chair? Probably not. These things are instantaneous. But I can become aware that my mind is literally constructing reality. It is constructing that object as a chair based on the name and form of all the chairs I've ever known. And maybe that knowledge gives me a little more freedom to let go of my story, my extra house, and just let things be as they are. Freedom from the bonds of the separate self. This is the highest teaching offered by all the non-dual traditions. Advaita Vedanta, Zen, Dzogchen, mystic Christianity, Sufism, they all offer instructions that promise to reveal that we are not truly separate, that our sense of bondage in this way is constructed, that all the fragments that we clutch to ourselves and call us are just fragments. There's no kernel of a separate, lonely little self in there, in any of it. There's only reality as it is, beyond description, beyond language, beyond name and form, free. My advice then, in terms of breaking these bonds of the isolation of a separate self, is to take up any of these paths and follow it wholeheartedly. As people like to say in Zen, try it for 10 years. If it doesn't work, try it for another 10. I mean, you're going to die. What else are you going to do? So, after all this, what does true freedom look like? It's freedom from the chase to fill up our sense of scarcity with external objects, instead, just sitting quietly. It's freedom from the internal running away from our threatening superego, our harsh internal voice, instead, turning towards it with curiosity. And it's freedom from the bonds of the separate self, instead, discovering that what we truly are was never bound. The door of the cage has always been open. I'll close with this. One of my Zen friends has been visiting me this week, and we've been having a lot of conversations about meaning and purpose. He was pointing out that the way we talk, these ideas often come as a single package. Like if you found the meaning of life, it's inherently to do with the purpose of what you're doing here. But to me, meaning and purpose are entirely different things. Indeed, I think that meaning can only be experienced fully once you've completely let go of purpose. Once you've stopped trying to do something, be someone, fill the unstructured time correctly, make decisions, figure it all out. When you just sit quietly, keep the body still, let the myriad things rest, and turn towards your life with curiosity. It's then that the inherent meaning that suffuses experience comes blooming forth, and you see that all of life is suffused with meaning, shot through with meaning, redolent with meaning, bursting forth with meaning. Experience itself shimmers with meaning. Not to an end, not for any purpose, but inherently. To me, this is what is conveyed by the Basho poem, with which I'll end. Sitting quietly, doing nothing. Spring comes, and the grass grows by itself. Thank you. Huh? Okay.
Thank you so much, Raka. We value your things from your point of view, and I'm sure you've introduced some new ideas into our minds that will help us even reinterpret how our ideas of Vedanta and our own spiritual struggles. So thank you so much. Okay. I have a few announcements today. As we mentioned earlier, Swami Satchidananda is out of town, but he will be returning tomorrow. We do have arati and meditation every night at 6 p.m. here in Seattle and in our retreat at Tapovan. This Wednesday at 7 p.m., there will be a gospel class given by Swami Avikarnanda. And on Thursday at 7 p.m., via Google Meet, Swami Brahmatmananda will be continuing his reading and study of the Gospel of the Holy Mother. Swami Satchidananda will be leaving Seattle again, and before the Friday class that he normally gives, so that Friday class is canceled. He's been invited to Berkeley to attend their July 4th celebration. This coming Sunday, again, he is out of town, and Swami Brahmatmananda from our retreat property in the Tapovan will be giving a talk on Karma Yoga for the West. And also next Sunday, we have Ramnam, and Raka will be leading our Ramnam singing next Sunday at 7 p.m. So I will conclude now with a chant. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhaved. May all be happy. May all be free from disease. May all realize what is good. May none be subject to misery. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings.